Welcome, listeners, to the Whispering Library. Tonight, we venture into the quiet rot at the edges of civilization, to a place where the line between refuge and trap blurs, and the most disturbing horrors are not supernatural, but deeply, chillingly human. We visit Sanctuary Creek, a town like any other, perhaps, but one holding a secret far more persistent and insidious than simple neglect. They closed a house there recently, a place the authorities called a nuisance. But sometimes, shutting a door only traps the truth inside, or forces it to find a new way out. Prepare yourself, for on Willow Lane, the echoes last a lifetime. Part 1. The Quiet Rot of Sanctuary Creek. Sanctuary Creek wasn't sanctuary to anyone I knew. It was a place the city maps barely acknowledged, a pocket of urban decay nestled beside forgotten rail lines and a river that ran thick with sediment. My assignment seemed simple enough: cover the success story. The city council and local police were parading a recent victory: the closure of 114 Willow Lane, a property notorious for years as a hub of crime and disorder. They called it a turning point, proof that they were finally reclaiming the neighborhood. Standing across the street from the boarded-up house, a laminated order plastered on its front door forbidding entry. It looked less like a victory and more like a hastily applied bandage. Break time equals 0. 7S / the street itself was quiet, too quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning, but the strained silence of a place holding its breath. Windows were curtained or boarded. Front yards were overgrown or bare dirt scattered with debris. The air tasted faintly of damp concrete and something metallic, something stale. Even the sunlight filtering through the hazy sky seemed tired here. A man emerged from the house next door, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket, his eyes scanning the street with automatic vigilance. I raised a hand, hoping to get a quote, but he flinched as if struck, pulling the hood tighter around his face. He shuffled past, head down, offering only a guttural mumble I couldn't decipher before vanishing around the corner. His reaction wasn't fear of a stranger. It was fear etched deep, a reflex. Further down the street, a cluster of gray poles stood watch. Not streetlights, though some were mounted on similar posts. These were cameras, swiveling slowly, their dark lenses following my movements. It wasn't just the police watching. This surveillance felt different, more pervasive, more personal. It felt like the street itself was watching. I found a woman sitting on a cracked stoop further down. She looked weary, her hands gnarled, tracing patterns on her worn jeans. When I asked her about 114, about the closure order, her eyes darted nervously. That house. Yeah, they shut it down, she said, her voice raspy, barely above a whisper. Took him long enough. Do you think it will make a difference? I pressed, trying to keep my tone gentle. She scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. For that house. Maybe. For Willow Lane? She shrugged, her gaze drifting to the network of cameras. Sanctuary Creek is what it is, kid. Always has been. She spoke of things I'd only read about in police blotters. Broken windows, late-night shouting, the faint sweet sick smell of cannabis, the occasional flash of violence. Machetes, she'd said casually. Shots through windows. It was delivered with a chilling lack of melodrama, as if recounting the weather. This wasn't a story about crime. It was a story about living with crime, accepting it as a fact of life like humidity or taxes. Break time equals 0. 7S / doesn't it scare you? I asked. She finally looked at me, her eyes holding a depth of resignation that chilled me more than anything Shed said. Suppose if you ain't used to it, yeah? You be scared. Me? This is my normal. Her words stuck with me as I left Willow Lane. This is my normal. The official narrative was a success story, a troubled property cleaned up. But the people who lived there didn't see it that way. They saw a single door closed on a street where countless other doors remained open to whatever darkness thrived just beneath the surface. The success felt hollow, a performance for the city council and the news cameras, while the real story, the normal, remained untouched, watching from the shadows. Part 2. The Seeds of Doubt. My editor liked the initial piece. Good job, Alex. Captured the official line, got a little local flavor. Local flavor. It felt like calling a festering wound a paper cut. The official line felt like a lie. The police inspector, Ray Maxwell, had been all smiles and statistics. Crime reports down, public confidence up, tenant eviction successful. But every resident I'd spoken to, even those who wouldn't give their names, had projected an overwhelming sense of dread, a palpable fear that contradicted the inspector's cheerful report. The image of the man flinching, the woman's resigned, this is my normal, the unsettling network of cameras. They gnawed at me. The closure of 114, Willow Lane, felt less like the end of a problem and more like the forced amputation of a visible symptom, leaving the underlying disease to spread unchecked. I couldn't shake the feeling that the real story wasn't what happened at 114, but why it happened there, and why Willow Lane had become this pocket of accepted lawlessness. I started digging beyond the official reports. Court documents for the closure order were boilerplate. Reports of calls to that address over the past 4 years painted a grim picture. Disturbances, suspected drug activity, assaults, even reports of weapons. But it felt disconnected, a list of incidents without context. It didn't explain the chilling resignation, the feeling of being watched, the casual mention of machetes and shootings as routine. I decided to go back, not as a reporter covering a press release, but as someone trying to understand the normal the residents spoke of. I parked several blocks away and approached Willow Lane on foot, trying to blend in. The cameras still tracked movement, subtle shifts of the lens. It wasn't just 114 they were watching, it was the whole street. I found Maria Rossi at her small office downtown, the letting agent who managed properties on Willow Lane, including the one next door to the closed house. She was bright, energetic, almost jarringly optimistic compared to the street she worked on. "Oh, the Ainsworth place," she exclaimed, referring to 114 by a name that seemed older, tied to its history before its notoriety. Such a relief to have that sorted. It really brought the whole street down. "My tenants next door, they're sleeping easier now," they told me. She spoke of her vision for Willow Lane, bringing in good tenants, revitalizing the neighborhood. Her sincerity was disarming, but it felt naive, like painting overwrought without treating the wood. The residents I spoke to, they seemed pretty scared. Even after the closure, I ventured. They talked about things still happening, feeling watched. Maria's smile faltered slightly. "Well, habits die hard, I suppose. And there's still elements around. But the police are present. They're doing their best." Her best felt like a thin shield. She mentioned working closely with the police and the council to get the closure order. It was a collaborative effort, she emphasized. Everyone working together. But the residents' fear didn't feel like the remnants of old habits. It felt current, active. Walking back towards Willow Lane later that day, I saw a utility worker, chest-mounted camera conspicuous on his vest. He glanced towards a cross street, then quickly looked away. As I got closer, he gave a subtle shake of his head, a silent warning, before continuing his work. The casual presence of drug deals, the implied danger, wasn't confined to 114 Willow Lane. It was woven into the fabric of the place. The seeds of doubt had taken root. This wasn't just about a single problem house. It was about a street and neighborhood living under a constant, unspoken threat, a threat that shutting down one property hadn't even scratched. The mystery wasn't who was at 114, but what held Willow Lane captive, and why its residents had come to accept the unacceptable. My investigation had truly begun. Part 3. The Deepening Mystery. I spent the next few days immersing myself in Sanctuary Creek, specifically the perimeter of Willow Lane. The cameras were a constant, silent presence, mounted on streetlights, utility poles, even the corners of some houses. They weren't overtly threatening, but their sheer number created an unnerving atmosphere. Who owned them? Who was watching? I managed to speak to Eleanor Vance again, the woman from the stoop. This time, I met her in a small, run-down park several blocks away from the eyes of Willow Lane. She was more open, though still hesitant. "It ain't just the cameras, honey," she murmured, picking a loose thread on her sleeve. "It's the feeling, like eyes on your back, even when you don't see them." She spoke of the ones who run things, not by name, but with a hushed reverence that suggested they were powerful, untouchable. They controlled the flow, she said, vaguely, gesturing towards the street. It wasn't just petty drug dealers. It felt more organized, more insidious. They didn't just sell drugs. They controlled the fear, the silence. The Ainsworth place. Before they closed it, she continued, her voice dropping even lower. "That wasn't just a crack house. Not really. That was like the front porch. You went there, you talked to the wrong person, you saw the wrong thing. Things happened." "What kind of things?" I pressed. She shuddered. "Things folks don't talk about. Like what happened to old Mr. Davison down the street. Said he saw something he shouldn't have. Next thing you know, window shot out, warning. Then he was just gone. Moved away, they said. But nobody really believes that. Mr. Davison wasn't in any recent police reports I found. His disappearance, if it was one, was a ghost story of the local legend used to enforce silence. Eleanor confirmed the machetes and shots weren't just random acts. They were messages, warnings. I tried to track down Mr. Henderson, the man who'd flinched away. He seemed to vanish whenever I was on the street. The residents who would talk did so only in whispers, in neutral locations, constantly looking over their shoulders. Their fear wasn't just of crime. It was fear instilled by something specific, something watching. Maria Rossi remained frustratingly optimistic. "Progress takes time. Alex," she'd said when I spoke to her again, her smile fixed. "You focus on the negative. That's all you'll see. We need to focus on the positive changes." She seemed willfully blind, or perhaps genuinely believed the official narrative was the only path forward. I spent hours researching the history of Sanctuary Creek, looking for any past events, any powerful families or businesses that might have a long-standing influence. The area around Willow Lane had once been industrial, tied to the old rail yards. When the industry left, decay set in. A common story, but it didn't explain the level of organized fear. The underpass beneath the old railway tracks, the one mentioned in the original report as having smashed lights, became a focal point. It was dark, damp, a place the sunlight never reached. Graffiti covered every surface. Locals avoided it after dark. It felt like a natural hiding place, a place where things happened unseen. I ventured into it cautiously, the echoing drip of water amplifying the silence. I found discarded evidence of drug use, but also something else, a symbol spray painted on the wall, stylized, almost tribal. I'd seen it before, faintly, in the graffiti on the closed Ainsworth house. It wasn't random tagging, it was a mark. My investigation was pulling at threads that led not just to drug dealers, but to a system of control enforced by fear and silence, possibly tied to the area's history or a hidden local power structure. The closed house felt less like a cause and more like a symptom, or perhaps even a deliberate sacrifice to distract from the real operation. The tension mounted with every question asked, every shadow scrutinized. The feeling of being watched was no longer a suspicion. It was a certainty. Someone or something didn't want me digging here. Part 4. The Turning Point. The symbol. The recurring, stylized mark I'd seen on the Ainsworth house and again in the underpass. It wasn't just graffiti, it was a brand. I cross-referenced local gang signs, historical society records, even obscure urban art databases. Nothing matched, but it felt significant. It felt like a signature. Then a breakthrough. I showed a sketch of the symbol to a former city planner, now retired and willing to talk off the record. He looked at it, his brow furrowed. "Haven't seen that in years," he muttered. "Remind me of something from back when the old rail yards were still operating. There was this informal group. Ran protection, gambling, that kind of thing. They had a mark. Called themselves the Foundry Men. Tough as nails." The Foundry Men. The name resonated with the area's industrial past. I dug deeper, scouring old newspaper archives, police reports from decades ago. The Foundry Men weren't a traditional gang. They started as enforcers, managing disputes and illicit activities around the rail yards when law enforcement was scarce. They adapted when the industry died, shifting to other rackets, but maintaining their control through intimidation and deep roots in the community. They didn't seek notoriety. They thrived in the shadows, their power based on silence and fear. Their method was chillingly simple. Identify vulnerable properties and residents, exert pressure, establish control. The Ainsworth place, 114 Willow Lane, hadn't just become a drug house. It had been deliberately cultivated as a visible hub, a controlled point of distribution and activity. But it wasn't the source of their power. It was a front, a sacrifice they could afford to lose. The turning point came when I found a brief, overlooked article from 20 years ago. A police raid on a warehouse near Willow Lane, described as a major blow to local organized crime. Several arrests were made, but the ringleaders evaded capture. The article mentioned seizing records, but the details were vague. The retired planner confirmed the warehouse was rumored to be a Foundry Men operation. The symbol was mentioned in the report, dismissed as gang tagging. The truth slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. The Foundry Men hadn't been defeated. They'd simply gone deeper underground. They'd learned. Instead of centralizing in one vulnerable location, they decentralized, using multiple properties, operating through intermediaries, relying even more heavily on intimidation and the community's ingrained fear. The network of cameras wasn't random. There were Foundry Men eyes, watching their territory, identifying threats, like a reporter asking too many questions. The closure of 114, Willow Lane wasn't a victory against crime. It was a strategic retreat by the Foundry men, shedding a compromised asset while their true operation remained intact, hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of Willow Lane. Inspector Maxwell's success story was built on a carefully managed illusion. Maria Rossi's optimism, while perhaps genuine in intent, was enabling the problem by focusing only on the surface. The fear wasn't a relic of the past. It was a tool of control, actively maintained. The normal of Willow Lane wasn't just neglect. It was a cage built by unseen hands. Part 5. The Aftermath and Lingering Shadows. The revelation was a heavy burden. Exposing it felt impossible. The Foundry men operated not through grand gestures, but through subtle pressure, quiet threats, and the deep-seated reluctance of the community to speak out. They were the shadows that watched, the whispers that silenced. I wrote the story, detailing the Foundermen's likely continued operation, the symbol, the controlled fear, the possibility that the Ainsworth closure was a strategic move. I sent it to my editor. She was hesitant. It was circumstantial, she said, based on conjecture and the word of fearful residents. Without concrete proof, it was a difficult story to run, potentially libelous. The official narrative was safer, cleaner. Eleanor Vance stopped answering my calls. I saw Mr. Henderson on Willow Lane one afternoon. He saw me, his eyes widening in a mixture of fear and warning, and quickly ducked inside his house. Maria Rossi, when I tried to explain my findings, became defensive, then frosty. "I'm trying to do good work here, Alex," she said stiffly, "spreading these kinds of rumors. It's not helping anyone." Inspector Maxwell was polite but dismissive. "We follow the evidence, Mr. Carter. The evidence led to the closure order. We stand by our results." He looked tired, perhaps genuinely believing he'd made a difference, or perhaps unwilling to look deeper, to acknowledge the scale of the problem. My story was spiked. Too risky. Too hard to prove. The official success story stood. Willow Lane remained quiet, its surface undisturbed. But I knew what lay beneath. The cameras still watched. The underpass remained a place of shadows and secrets. The symbol, the mark of the Foundry men, was still there, a silent declaration of ownership. The closure of 114, Willow Lane, changed nothing fundamental. The root of the problem, the system of fear and control, the normal of accepted crime and silence, remained firmly entrenched. The residents were still trapped, their fear validated, their hopes for a real change dashed. My investigation had uncovered the truth, but the truth had no power here. It was just another secret buried in the heart of Sanctuary Creek. I left Sanctuary Creek, but Willow Lane stayed with me. The feeling of being watched, the resigned faces of the residents, the chilling understanding that sometimes the most frightening monsters aren't those who announce themselves with violence, but those who control the silence, who make fear a way of life. The wound of Willow Lane remained open, festering in the quiet rot, unseen by the world, tended only by the shadows that lingered, forever watching.